Hello. So this video, I'm going to be talking about UV unwrapping with our little environment kit. UV unwrapping is probably the most annoying thing that we have to do when it comes to modeling, but this is like the easiest way about getting some colors for our models, and it can still get like a really nice look to it. So first and foremost, just so that you're kind of up to speed on my file here, I have my table here. I can zero this out so it brings its pivot at its center. So this is after setting pivots, after clearing out the input nodes, labeling all of my objects. I even added underscore GEO just to be very crystal clear its geometry, even though the icon kind of like already describes it. Uh, the underscore GEO, I'm just leaving that as like optional for those of you that want to kind of type that in. Um, Different studios kind of have different labeling practices in general. So I'm having all these pieces separated out just so it's a little easier to see. And I can always zero out the translates in order to bring it back to origin. So the first thing, once we get all this set up, that we want to do is we want to make sure that all of these pieces of geometry in this kind of situation, just to keep things simple, is we want them to have a single simple material. They're all going to share the same material because I have in my source images folder of the Maya project folder this gradient texture. So if I double click to open this up, I only really need 4 colors in this file. If you need more colors for what you're working on, feel free to add more strips. And the nice thing with gradient is it looks a lot better than just flat colors. So everything's going to be sharing the same texture and the same material. We're keeping things as simple as possible. And we're going to slowly introduce a little bit more of the higher end elements. So if you click on this little blue circle that looks like a pool ball, or we can go to Windows, um, and it is, where are you floating around? Rendering editors, Hypershade. So same icon right there, you will get this window pop and open, the Hypershade window. Now, the nice thing with the Hypershade is we can ignore a lot of this right off the bat. So if we take a look at the Hypershade, we can ignore all of this section right here. We don't need to worry about that. This section down over here, we only care about this text box and then clicking on one thing that's going to appear there. So we're only going to like just dabble very briefly. And this is where we're going to spend the majority of our time, a little bit here. And we can kind of ignore this, but this is like a nice little, I get a viewing idea of what's going to happen. So what we can make use out of is I'm going to start typing in what's called standard. So Standard. And you're going to see 2 different standard surfaces. You can click on the top one. I believe both of them are the exact same. They're just kind of in a different folder, right? Uh, so we get this standard surface 2. Now, I want to make sure that I know that this material is for my environment, and I'm going with like a tavern theme. So I'm going to call this tavern underscore MAT for material. So this is a material that comes from this shader. So the shader is kind of like, here are the rules that defines what materials can do. And the material is the actual individual creation from that. Now, with this material right here, all of its attributes coming down here is the exact same as in this little bottom right corner as well. In this middle section, this is what's called the node view, where we can use nodes in order to just plug together to connect them. While over on this side here, the bottom right corner, this is where we have some sliders and attachments. So it's kind of like we get to edit the values themselves in the bottom right corner, while in this middle section, this is where we can connect and see how the individual nodes interact with each other. Uh, and if you didn't understand a lot of that, just say okay and just move on. It's not 100% necessary right now. Now, the next thing with this standard surface material, so I'm just going to highlight this little section here. We're only going to focus on three different things. We're going to focus on color, on metalness, and roughness right over here. So the metalness, it's already defaulted to 0, which is what we want. So we can just leave this be. Roughness, we're going to change this to be 1.0. So all we have to do is just take this little slider and drag it all the way to the end. So I'm just going to do that right now. So the roughness, we can see the little preview right here of how it looks like if I just make this bigger. The roughness, as I bring this roughness down to 0, that means it's becoming smoother, right? The opposite of rough. You can actually start seeing the reflection of this environment space. And if you want to see the reflection even more, I'm going to crank up the metalness up to make it basically a mirror, right? Because mirrors, they're metal and they're very, very smooth. That's why they can reflect so much. So here you get a nice visual look at the what's called an HDR image, high definition range image, that is used in order to create fake lighting. And so with it being high metal, if I start making it less smooth, we can see that that image starts getting blurred. The more and more and more and more and more. So we're going to leave this roughness, metalness at 0 and roughness at 1. That way it's just a very simple opaque thing. So we are basically focusing on something that's very simple. That's going to just the colors in our texture is basically going to define everything right now, just so that we're minimizing the complexity. So now color, you can actually click on this the little color tab, and right now we're at this like near white. It actually is white or like a touch off, but we can actually change the color. And you can actually see the color change in this object right here. Now, what we can do is I can take my tavern material and I can middle mouse click and hold down and I can drag this material and let go of the middle mouse button on top of any of my models. And it will apply that material to each of those models. So now if I go and change this color, I can actually see that change happening to my models as well, right? So play around a moment with that just to kind of see how they interact. Now, if you change the roughness, you're not going to see a crazy amount of change happening. You can see it in like, for example, your barrel, just because there's like some rounding going on. You can see like the highlights kicking in. If you turn on the metalist, it's just going to get very, very dark and hard to see. And it's just because of the preview rendering that's going on right now. It is very limited. So it makes it a little challenging. So we're just going to leave metals at 0, roughness at 1. When we dive into Unreal Engine or Blender, we're going to have an easier time seeing how the metal and roughness behave. Um, so now with that connected, now we have this one material on every single one of our pieces of geometry. So from here, this is where this middle node section is important. Uh, so this color slider right here is the same as base color. If you click on this little plus button, you can see red, green, and blue, right? The three little channels right there. If I close this off, that red dot is each of them. So what I can do right now is I can take my little gradient textures image and I can use the left mouse button to just drag and drop it right inside of this middle window space. And right away, it will create two nodes. So we have the actual texture image file itself, and we have this extra place 2D texture node. This node for right now, it just kind of tells it's way from Maya to tell this image how the image is going to behave within the UV space. If that's confusing, just kind of go with it. We'll be diving a little bit more in depth with it as the semester goes on. Uh, what we care about here with our image file is this out color. So our image is a color image. And so we can actually grab, if we wanted to, just the red channel, the green, or the blue channel. Or we can just grab this node, this little dot right here, which is all three of those channels combined. So I'm going to left mouse click on this little dot, and it's going to drag until I hover over this red dot and just let go. And once that happens, you'll see this nice little like line that connects them, this wire. And you should be able to see in this upper little corner right here, the colors of the gradients kind of appearing in this like interesting shape. And inside of Maya, if I left click inside of this camera view, just in order to make sure that I have the camera view active, if I press 6, 6 lets me see the actual textures. So 4, it's wireframe. 5 is just simple shading. And 6 is the colors. So the ground now it's basically the whole entire image. My barrel, I could see it has a whole bunch of different colors in different ways. Same with the table and the wall. So from here, this is where we now deal with what's called UVs. So UVs, if I click on UV in the modeling menu set, UV and UV editor, UVs are an interpretation of how we want 2D images to appear on 3D objects. And if I select the barrel, for example, we can see that already the shapes look a little different. And that is all because of what the original polygon shapes originally were and how their UVs by default are. Uh, so we can kind of ignore this element right now for the most part, but for those that are super curious, we can actually like play around a little bit. And I'm just gonna go a lot closer to the barrel here. I can hold down right click and go to UV mode and select the UVs and start moving around, and I can see the colors changing on the barrel. I can even double click on one of these UVs in order to grab all the same UVs that are connected. I can see as I move this around, it's this lower torus right here. Right. So what we're going to do with this assignment is we're going to change how this looks because we kind of want like it to be lighter up above and darker down below. That's why we're using the gradients so that we have like this nice range in colors. So I'm going to go back to object mode for a moment here, and I'm going to tap spacebar, which lets me change this four camera views. And I can see that on the side view, I can see flat the barrel. And if I press F with the cursor over the front uh, camera, I can snap to see the camera right here. So I'm going to sorry, not tab, press spacebar, tap it, in order to make the front camera my primary one. Because if you move the cursor on top of any of these cameras, that will become the main big camera at this moment. So with this barrel selected, looking through this camera, You could even do this with the side. I'm going to go to UV and camera based. And just so that you can see what happens, I'm going to bring the UV editor right into space. So right now the UVs look like this, right? It probably doesn't make sense to you, and that's okay. If I go to UV and camera based, what it does is it takes like a projection. It looks at how the shape, this model that I have selected, looks like inside this camera view and fits it within the image space. So it stretches and squashes it a little bit just so it fits within the camera's view. And if I press 6 here in order to see the textures, you can actually see different color strips, just like how it is over here. And if I go into the 3D view, I can rotate the camera and I can see up above that these color pixels up here, it's stretching along. So it's dark down below, bright up above, and the colors just stretch across. So what we can do now is we have that light up above and dark down below. We can actually make a lot of cool changes to this. So I'm going to go back to UV mode. I'm going to select everything. And I can use the scale tool. That's just same as inside of the Maya's workspace. It's using W for move, E for rotate, R for scale. So I'm going to just scale this in so it's thin enough to fit with whichever color I want my barrel to be. So if I want my barrel to be like a lighter wood color, I'm going to go here. If I want it to be like a more of a dark oak, or if I want it to be like a little bit of a medium brown, um, and this is where even thinking about color theory, right? Of if I go this brown and then I use my gray here for the metal, it's kind of the same uh, values. So I'm actually going to go for like this darker brown. Now, what I can do next is I can, whilst on UV mode, I can double click on my UVs for these metal rings and slide them around. Or I can hold down right click in the object mode, to go to face mode here within the camera view. And I could double click on one of my faces in order to be able to select that whole entire object. Even though that I combined all of the four toruses and the cylinder together, I can still easily select them individually just by double clicking on one of the faces and I'll grab all the other faces it's a part of. I'm just going to drag that over. So now I have my wooden barrel with metal rings. And if I find that this is too dark with these metal rings down here, I can just grab the faces from up here and just raise them up, right? I have full control on exactly where I want these pieces to land. So maybe I want this to be lighter. Maybe I don't want it to be as dark. And I can just box select these and bring these up as well. And if I go back to object mode in this space, deselect just so I don't have to see all the other stuff, there is my barrel, right? So the table is easy. By default, it's kind of this jumbled up mess. And if I take a look at the table, it's kind of hard to tell where all the pieces are. And that's just because it started off as a um, cube and I did some cuts. I sliced it a bunch and it's now a jumbled mess. So I'm just going to start off the exact same way as before. I'm going to go to either the front or the side, right? I can always go to the side view because there's more visually to see. And again, UV camera based. And so that will change the UVs to fit within this space based on this look. And if I go into this view, I can see the colors moving along the side like so. So now this table, I can just select all my UVs. I can scale it in. and just nudge it a little bit. Maybe I don't like how dark it's getting down here, so maybe I'll just like shrink it down and raise it up just so that it still has that gradient in there, but it's not as extreme, right? That looks a lot nicer than what it could have been. And the other thing too, if I wanted to, I can always grab like all these faces, grab all of these individually, and I can even look from like the top view, for example, and go UV, camera based. And so all these UVs are now kind of separated out. Seems like I may have not grabbed one polygon right there, but I can even rotate these around. I can scale them just in case I wanted that like a darker toned top. Go to brighter bottom, and also this way I have like light on one side, dark on the other side. So you can actually like play around with this if you want. So, so there's options with that. Uh, and so with all of my pieces, I'm just going to do that. So here, this wall piece, I'm going to look at from this point of view, camera base with it selected. I could see now that it has the color strips. That's awesome. And if I go back into my 3D viewport, I want these parts of my wall, like the main body part, I want that to be this lighter tone. So I'm just going to scale that in and bring that over to this space right here. And then the rest of this, so I'm going to hold down shift and box select these middle pieces just to kind of get rid of this selection. So the rest of these, I'm going to scale them in and I'm going to put them into this darker space. But these lower ones, I'm going to raise them up just so they're not as dark. Or maybe I do want them dark. But what I can do also is, uh, if I go to object mode for the time being, right, I'm going to move this out of the way for a moment. Uh, with the way that this is, it's hard to see, like, I have like these little bevels in between just to kind of like have some light and give some depth in there, but it's kind of lost, right? So what I can do in this kind of situation is I can grab each of these faces, right? Just the front face for every single one of these. And I could do what I just showed earlier with the table. Because if I leave the sides nice and dark, then it's going to help give this like fake sense of shadow. This is because I went fancy with the wall. So with this all selected, I'm going to go back into that front view and I'm going to go back and do UV camera base just so that these panels are separated out. And I'm just going to scale these in. I'm going to scale them so they're shorter, but make them brighter in this gradient. So their sides are down here, but the fronts are up in that spot. So now if I go back to object mode, I can see that the darker inside parts, it kind of gives this nice like little fake shadow going on. And you know, this piece and this piece, they're pretty dark as whole. So maybe I want to stretch these up in order to see gradation, but bring these up higher. And if I go to object mode again, I can now see it's a little brighter. I got this like gradation going down. Maybe it's a little too much for my taste. So maybe I will just darken it up a touch. And I'm going to double click on one of these faces and I'm just going to scale it up, but also raise this up just so it's still It's a little bit lighter to for like what I want. So you have like full control with something as simple as this in order to get like some really nice, interesting looks. And this flooring space, whatever you kind of want to do with this, you can have it where it's very, very tiny, not a huge difference. And maybe I want it to feel like it's like a stone floor, so I'm gonna keep it as color. We'll deal with textures later on with painting. So right now we're just dealing with like super flat colors with gradation image, just in order to get something interesting. So that's kind of like the goal and vibe with this. So I hope that helps a little bit for those that either missed the class or kind of followed along, but this is all like super new and forgot like a certain step here and there. We're going to build up on UVs and dive more into discussions of how important UVs are and what we can do with controlling it and even painting textures more than just a gradation with our models in the next assignment and the assignment after. So enjoy. Hope you have a good time with this. Hope you have like a little bit of fun. And as you can see, like you can get like some cool, interesting, simple colors, and hopefully you feel like pretty proud of yourself with what you're doing. So enjoy for now. And also, oh yeah, here's a mistake. I accidentally have a keyframe in there. Make sure you delete all keyframes. So if you see like red at any point, get rid of it. And here, because I moved UVs, created UVs and moved them around, we can see that there's new inputs. So I'm just going to box select all of these and hit this delete by type history. And that'll clean up our new inputs. So enjoy.